Now, in my opinion, out of all the hosts, the lefty host and new media, David Pakman and Sam Seder are the worst. And I have many different problems with the two of them, but one of the main ones, the overarching problems that I have with them, is their lack of criticism for the extremely corrupt Democratic Party and the Democratic establishment. Most of the content that they do on this show is just the typical hacky, nonstop, Trump bad, Republican bad nonsense that you'd see on most mainstream media outlets. And in fact, this more goes to David Pakman because I really don't even look at Sam Seder's show anymore. But oftentimes the story selection is literally exactly the same as whatever the mainstream media is harping away on in the last news cycle. Now, yeah, it's their show. They can post whatever content they want. But as if someone who's on the left, and I guess you could say I'm a host in new media on the left, I find it particularly egregious that they spend so much time not talking about the Democratic Party, especially seeing how the Democratic Party is the biggest obstacle to the left-wing movement in this country. I don't think it's Trump. I don't think it's the Republicans. It is the Democratic Party, because at every turn they undermine progressives, and they even very often would cheat progressives and undermine progressives in primaries. So they're the main ones blocking any type of social democratic reform in the party and in the country. So I always find it stunning that as a Democratic Party is being as corrupt as it's ever been, especially in light of what we learned in 2016, I find it stunning that people on the left in new media largely ignore that to talk about how bad Trump and the Republicans are. Now, their coverage of this fiasco, debacle, mayhem that has been going on in Iowa for the last week has been basically what you'd expect from these two. Basically just chalking this all up to incompetence and coincidence, while at the same time making it seem that the people saying what seems to be obvious at this point, which is that the Democratic Party is outright openly trying to cheat Bernie Sanders, trying to make it seem like they're the crazy ones and they need to cool their jets because they're jumping to conclusions that there really isn't evidence for. So I just have a small clip from a video that Sam Seder posted on his YouTube channel where he describes what he thinks happened in Iowa.
There's obviously been a lot of sort of conspiracy theories that have been promulgated online because presumably, and maybe less so as we see the real results, Bernie Sanders was denied a victory speech. And certainly the implications of the Des Moines Register poll that would have come out showing Bernie Sanders ahead was also held back. Now, the people associated with the poll have nothing to do with the people associated with the app and with the Iowa Democratic Party. But nevertheless, I think the problem is, and this is, a dynamic that exists not just in the Democratic Party. It exists in private enterprise. It exists in social clubs, in churches.
Air America.
And in Air America. And this is, I will say this. When you have monumental incompetence that is a function of people self-dealing and of people who are simply pursuing a task where the pursuit of that task is secondary to enriching themselves, it certainly will create an atmosphere where people develop conspiracy theories because they can't imagine that those people don't share the same basic agenda where success is not job number one.
All right, so let's follow Sam Seder's own logic here. By his interpretation of the situation, it's not that the Democratic Party was outright conspiring to cheat Bernie Sanders in Iowa, even though that is, when you put in context, everything that's gone on the last week is the most logical conclusion. Sam Seder believes that this all comes down to incompetence, and the Democratic Party is doing a bunch of self-dealing. And actually, the way he describes it is self-dealing is their number one priority, and then running a functioning or overseeing a functioning electoral process comes second. So if you admit that self-dealing is the number one concern of the Democratic establishment and leadership of the party, why is it so outside the realm of possibility that that same self-dealing Democratic Party is doing everything in their power to stop Bernie Sanders? Because if he's the nominee, the self-dealing is done. The gravy train is over. And this entire consultant class, this where it's just a circle jerk of money, all of that shit gets disbanded, and the great, like I said, the gravy train for them is over. So why is it so outside the realm of possibility to believe that since self-dealing is their number one priority, they're not gonna do every unethical, impossible, illegal trick that they have up their sleeve to stop Bernie Sanders? Now, more than that, so like I said, he frames it as, okay, self-dealing is their number one priority, and then after that is running a fair, unbiased electoral process. What in your mind, what have you seen over the last however many years makes you think that the Democratic Party has any intention of running any kind of fair electoral process? I mean, we know that wasn't the case just in the very last presidential primary cycle. We know that they weren't at all trying to run any type of fair electoral process. So why do you think they just suddenly have a change of heart in 2020 and somewhere on the list is running a fair electoral process? How about this? This is the more likely list of priorities for the Democratic Party: self-dealing and putting their thumb on the scale to make sure that Bernie Sanders isn't the Democratic nominee. I don't know how you have those as your priorities and then somewhere in the list is a fair electoral process. Those are at odds with each other. Democratic Party has no intention of respecting the will of the voters if the will of the voters is populism and social democracy. So, I mean, it's like he lives in a fantasy world and he really believes that the Democratic Party isn't as corrupt as they are. Like, they don't just outright rig primaries and elections. The only way it's okay for them to say it is if there's like an audio recording of Tom Perez talking to Pete Buttigieg saying, all right, so how are we going to cheat the shit out of Bernie Sanders this time? Like, for them, that's the only reason, that's the only possible way anybody can come to the conclusion that there's cheating. If there's an actual audio recording, video evidence of Tom Perez sitting down with Pete Buttigieg saying, all right, now, so we're gonna have you pay for this app, and then this app's gonna change the votes, and we're gonna fuck Bernie Sanders. We're gonna rat fuck Bernie Sanders in the worst way imaginable. Like, is that the only way you can say that the DNC is cheating? When we know the whole context of the DNC, we know that they cheated this very same candidate, caught in broad daylight in the black and white, in their own words, cheating Bernie Sanders, coordinating between the DNC, the Hillary Clinton campaign, and the entire mainstream media. They were all coordinating to cheat Bernie Sanders. We already seen that. We know for a fact that it isn't just Bernie Sanders. It's just the entire progressive left movement in general. They don't want them in the Democratic Party, which is why we get all these, in congressional races, we see it too, where the DNC tips the scale and puts their thumb on the scale so that they can shut out progressives and prop up the establishment, centrist, status quo defending corporatist candidate. We see them do it all the time. They're doing it right now in Cenk Uyghur's race. The DNC, who claims to be neutral, who claims they only get involved in general elections and in primaries, their only role is to facilitate the process. Well, why is it in Cenk Uyghur's race in California, they are picking a candidate and they're supporting that candidate and they're trying to shiv Cenk Uyghur? Why are they doing that if they're neutral? Huh? If it's just incompetence that they, just so in Iowa, it's incompetence that they happen to screw over progressives. Why are they actively screwing over another progressive, Cenk Uyghur, in his race? Or in general, when the DCCC comes out and says anybody, literally any contractor who does business with a progressive challenging an incumbent corporate Democrat, an incumbent establishment Democrat, you will no longer get any contracts from the DNC. So effectively creating a blacklist of progressive challengers who are trying to participate in the democratic process and give the voters a choice of choosing between populism and corporatism. The DNC has put those people and anybody who works with them on a blacklist, effectively making it so that it's 10 times harder for progressives to run a campaign challenging an incumbent Democrat. That's not incompetence. That's an act of agency. That is a deliberate, thought out decision that the only conclusion of that decision is to screw progressives and to prop up the establishment candidates. So when we know all of this about the DNC, and then what happens in Iowa, if you're going to still come out and say more than anything, it is likely incompetence more than anything, okay, then you're just a fucking idiot. Or you're a liar. Either one. But let me tell you this, I don't know how any progressives can or leftists can listen to these people as if they are providing some type of any analysis that's worth anything. Their analysis isn't worth shit if they can't come out and just say the DNC is trying to cheat Bernie Sanders at this point. So